Hi, welcome to my channel, Readerwoman. My name's Judy, and let's talk book tags. In particular, a book Steve hasn't read, book tag. This was created by Matthew and Mayberry Books. I've got the link below. And the idea is to collect out of your library 8 books that Steve Donoghue may not have read. I loved the idea of doing it the first time I saw it, and the first time I saw it was Brian at Bookish. I thought it was great. And I just got through seeing Samuel Durham. Hilarious. Excuse me, I'm in the middle of a little cold. So I've been working on collecting books that I think Steve Donoghue hasn't read. I'm going to start with a series. I say a series, but in the 80s, I was collecting books as often as I could, and one of the subscriptions I had was to Time Life Books. And they were coming out with quality books that were like undiscovered treasures that were out of print. And this one is from 1940-41. The book is called Kabloona, and it is by, and I'm going to butcher it, Gontran de Poncins. Poncins. I'm sorry. French wasn't the language I took in high school. This is an amazing adventure story about a man who went into the Arctic in the late 1930s, and he created, well, he and another man actually kind of put together, this other gentleman put together his writings into kind of a book form. And he also has illustrations throughout, and they're lovely things. There are also photographs that he took. Now, granted, I hate snow, but I loved this book. And I think that it may be old enough and not classic enough that Steve may not have read this. And it captures a society that was on the brink of, extinction. And I mean, you wouldn't be able to go back there and encounter life the way it was led in this book. And so, yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed reading it, and highly recommend it too. So if you haven't read it, Steve, I could let you borrow it. All right, on the same theme of my Time Life books, Solomon's Ring by Konrad Lorenz. I had always thought about naturalists as being people who go out into nature and observe. And Konrad Lorenz, as well as having these great little diagrams, reading this book made me understand that viewing nature can be just as simple as opening your window, opening your curtains, and looking outdoors. In my backyard, it's terrible. We are overpopulated with deer. So anytime I take my dog out to go for a walk, I have to be careful that there are no deer around. he chased him a couple of times, and he's gotten kicked a couple of times, and I don't want him to be hurt anymore. We have raccoons, squirrels, possums, rats, mice, all the birds. Last year, the varied thrush, which has this beautiful orange chest. It's also called the Alaskan redbreast, or Alaskan robin. And I observed that. It's like I tried drawing it a couple of times. It's exciting to look out your own window and observe nature. So anyways, this did have a very profound effect on me, and highly recommend it. Oh, and this one, I'm not quite sure when it was published. Along with the other one, it might have been from the 40s, around 1941, but I'm not sure. I wasn't able to quickly find out. And in the front, it gave like a 1960 something and then 1980. And it had to have been this edition, the 1980, because that's when I got it was a subscription service, and so I subscribed for a few months. And I must say, the books have been pretty wonderful. I still have a few I need to read, actually. And this is the last one in the Time Life. You can see what they tried to do was give it a double thick, I don't know if you can see that, not really, but a double thick binding here. The problem, but you know, you can see the pages are kind of coming apart, because when it becomes this thick, you have to kind of break it in order to read it. Now this one is Reveille in Washington, 1860 to 1865. And this is by Margaret Leech. It was published in 1941. And she, I was excited to see, it won the Pulitzer Prize for her. And basically, so sorry. Basically, she won the Pulitzer Prize, and this is looking at the Civil War through the city of Washington, D.C. And I really enjoyed reading this. It was just a different look at what was happening. And while, you know, being a West Coaster, being from the West, I was at Washington, D.C. once, but, you know, I didn't really go out and about beyond that. And I didn't understand how close South is to Washington, D.C. In fact, it's almost, you could consider it part of the South. So this really brought to life the fact of how close the city was to being overtaken by the Southerners at several points in the war. So yeah, if you're interested in Civil War history at all, this is a great, kind of unique little volume. So I picked those because I'd read them, and also I thought that they might have been forgotten classics that maybe Steve had never gotten to. Next on my list, let's see here, is I'm a huge fan of literature, history, memoirs of Africa in the early 1900s. And this is Speak to the Earth by Vivienne de Watteville, and her wanderings and reflections among elephants and mountains. She was born in 1900, and this is her story about her time in Africa, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. Let's see here. And while I probably my most, but you have Isaac Tennyson. You have Beryl Markham. And you also have Elspeth Huxley, who's probably my most favorite author. But I thought this might be something Steve hadn't read because it's not necessarily, talked about much. So I put this out there for that genre, people talking about Africa while it was still very much wild. So, yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I've read it a couple of times, actually. This one I wanted to talk about. I know this is a little unfair because I really do doubt, Steve, if you've read this one. And it's The Novel Cure. From Abandonment to Zestlessness. 751 Books to Cure What Ails You by Ella Berthoud and Susan Elderkin. This came out of England, and it was published in 2013. The idea of it is we read novels for entertainment, but we also read to learn about life and about ourselves. Read at the right moment in your life. A powerful novel can quite literally change it. So the idea is that bibliotherapy, the idea that you can be healed through literature, I think it's a great and powerful thought. And this is a quote from D.H. Lorenz. One sheds one's sicknesses in books, repeats and presents again one's emotions to be master of them. So they list all of these from adultery. And if you want to think about adultery before doing it, you might want to read Madame Bovary, they suggest. Anna Karenina, Patience by John Coates, and The Summer Without Men by Siri Hustvedt. And I think it's a brilliant thought about using great novels to help people deal with their emotions and thoughts. This is a medical handbook with a difference. Bibliotherapy, which is a noun. The prescribing of fiction for life's ailments. I love it. First of all, it does not discriminate between emotional pain and physical pain. You're as likely to find a cure within these pages for a broken heart as a broken leg. It also includes common predicaments you might find yourself in, such as moving house, looking for Mr. or Mrs. Right, or having a midlife crisis. Life's bigger challenges, such as losing a loved one or becoming a single parent, are in here too. Whether you've got the hiccups or a hangover, a fear of commitment, or a sense of humor failure, we consider it an ailment that deserves a remedy. Our medicines are not something you'll find at the drugstore, but at the bookshop, in the library, or downloaded onto your electronic reading device. We are bibliotherapists, and the tools of our trade are books. Our apothecary contains Balzacian balms and Tolstoyan tourniquets, the salves of Saramago, and the purges of Perec and Proust. To create it, we have trawled 2,000 years of literature for the most brilliant minds and restorative reads, from Apuleius, 2nd century author of The Golden Ass, to the contemporary tonics of Ali Smith and Jonathan Franzen. So I just wanted to bring up the topic of bibliotherapy and how, and I think it's a great thought. At one point a few years ago, I was thinking about going back and getting my degree in it. And I do. I love the idea that we can solve some of life's angst through reading. So, have you read it? And if not, what do you think about it? I'd love to hear Steve's thoughts about it, but also yours, anyone's thoughts. I think it's kind of brilliant. The next one is in particular Flann O'Brien's At Swim, Two Birds. I encountered this book. I encountered it because of a quote on the back. It said, "This is just the book to give your sister if she's a loud, dirty, boozy girl," by Dylan Thomas. It was first published in 1939. He got a quote from James Joyce, "A real writer with the true comic spirit, a really funny book. A book in 1,000, in the line of Tristram Shandy and Ulysses." It is a unique book, and he is, I think, a unique author. Have you read it, Steve? You probably hated it, because I know you hate Ulysses. I'm a huge James Joyce fan, and I was so excited to find this and read it. And I used this in conjunction, now not with this book, but another book by Tom Robbins, Only Cowgirls Get the Blues. And I used it in a comparative literature class. I used these two books along with some other books. I don't really remember the paper. But what I remember is my professor, as she was handing back our papers, she said to me that I had piqued her interest and that she was going to read both of those books. And I have always had this huge feeling of pride because nobody else in that class was quoting from popular literature. Now, granted, Tom Robbins was popular literature, but Flann O'Brien, I think he has a different place, a longer lasting place. And anyways, I haven't reread it in many, many years, but I plan to. And I think that this should be on more people's shelves. Anyways, it's another perhaps forgotten classic. Last, but to me not least, and I know, nobody likes her but me, is how I feel. But I wonder, Steve, have you read Everybody's Autobiography by Gertrude Stein? And do not immediately say, hate her, she is full of it, and she can't write worth beans. I say that because her autobiography of Alice B. Toklas is, I think, one of the most readable and enjoyable pieces of literature. It's a joy. I don't see why everybody doesn't read it. However, that's why I did not ask Steve if you had read this one, because I assume you have. I would assume everyone has. And if they have, why do you not like Ms. Stein more? Okay? But with that being said, I had somehow bought a copy of Everybody's Autobiography. And I am not a huge Stein scholar, but I do believe a couple of things about her. She was talented. However, the fact that she had too much money to be forced to make a living off of her writing meant that she could be as much of a crank as she wanted. And most of her writing, I feel, is illegible and not very good. I feel that way. Is it The History of Americans? Is that what it's called? Yeah, I don't remember. You know, I've tried reading it several times and it just bogs down to being impenetrable, in my opinion, as a reader. But with reading this, I've read this many times, enjoyed it every single time. And this, you know, this great Arrow copy. Look at how pretty this is. It has pictures, and there's Gertrude and Alice. But yeah, it's this beautiful little, I don't know how I was lucky enough to get it. But I just totally love this, this edition that I was able to purchase at my local used bookstore. But from there, I went to this book. And to me, this is one of the most interesting modern books I've read. And I say that because she forces you to read at her speed, which is very unusual. I first off started by hating this. I mean, I really did thoroughly dislike it. But then I started slowing down and I started, you know, I mean, she's a circular writer. And she wrote this book because the autobiography had been a tremendous success. And it scared her, I think, that she was a successful, well-known writer, because she was on tour. And she's writing about the experience of suddenly becoming famous after having to self-publish everything that she'd written before this. And she talks about speaking in front of the public, of going on this huge tour. Anyway, autobiography is easy, like it or not. Autobiography is easy for anyone. And so this is to be everybody's autobiography. And I really would like to encourage you, Steve, you, anybody who's still watching after all this time, to give Gertrude Stein a chance. And if you're not going to, and if you pick up this, to go ahead and try this, because I think this is also a modern classic. Anyways, I hope to hear whether I caught Steve unread or not. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this and we will talk again soon. Happy reading. Bye.